Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. So today's video is going to be a little bit different. I was thinking when I made the last one that the next one was going to be a layout update, but unfortunately that's not going to be the case, and here's why. I don't like the current layout that I have. I think there's a number of reasons for this, but I think the primary one is that it was one idea when I started it, and that idea didn't work out, so I tried to fill its place with another idea, and it just wasn't working. I didn't want to settle. I don't want to settle for a layout that I don't really like. So I've recently changed my thought process on approaching layout design, and this was because of a couple episodes of the Around the Layout podcast I listened to, Ray Arnott's Around the Layout podcast. The guest was Lance Mindheim on those episodes, and he was talking about his approach to model railroading and the hobby, and it seemed very fitting for who I am as a person. So in real life, I'm very much a minimalist. I don't have very much stuff. The stuff I do have, I hold on to for a very long time, as long as I can. For example, my phone is a very basic phone, and I'm going to keep this thing going until it melts in my hand. My approach to model railroading, I think, has to be the same. I need to find a very fitting way of approaching the hobby, and I think Lance Mindheim's way of doing this will work for me very well. So I wanted to go ahead and do a presentation, or a series of presentations, on the new and improved model railroad. So I'm changing my overall thought process on model railroading, and the simple answer is that I don't like the current layout. So I had to ask myself, well, why do I not like the current layout? There's four main reasons. The first being that the layout design does not support my modeling desires. Second being that the layout itself doesn't suit my preferred era and rolling stock. The next one is that the layout was rushed, and it definitely lacks proper design choices. Proper meaning, for the given space that I had, I didn't choose correctly. And lastly, the layout room space was not utilized correctly as well. And the main example of this would be a workbench. I did not leave room for a workbench in there, and I've been struggling with that in that I'm using the layout itself as a workbench, and that's just not really working. There's a lot of glue, a lot of paint, all kinds of things I don't want to get all over the layout, and I have to be very careful. So that's something that I didn't really consider as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at these ideas a little more closely. So the first one, the layout design does not support my modeling desires. Well, again, I had to ask myself a question: what do I desire? And there's, again, four key aspects. I like modern freight operations. I like the New England industrial scene, since I've grown up in New England and I currently live in New England. I also like switching customers versus running trains in a loop, although I do like rail fanning my trains as well. But switching customers is more enjoyable to me. And lastly, I like a variety of customers and modern rolling stock type. So the current layout, in theory, does meet the above criteria, so why am I unhappy? Well, I realized that this has to be addressed before I can begin to design a new layout. So the layout does not suit my preferred era and rolling stock type. So when I say modern rolling stock, I'm thinking 60-foot to 85-foot rolling stock, and the current design does not support that, both from a design standpoint, but also the construction choices. So the 18-inch curves, for example, very tight, not accurate for modern rolling stock. It also just doesn't look great. Even if the cars can make it around the curve, I just don't like the way it looks. I thought I could get over that, but I just don't like it at all. So the layout was rushed and lacks proper design choices. So I was just so excited to get this layout built. I thought I could settle for the tight curves, unrealistic track design choices and all that, and I could just focus on getting a layout built. I think I wanted a layout built so badly, I just let all this other stuff, I put it on the side and didn't think about it. And obviously there was implications later on down the road. So it came up a little formula here that tight curves plus unrealistic track design plus modern rolling stock equals frustration, equals major frustration. So the layout room space was not utilized correctly. So my layout room, which is very small, is 9 feet by 9 feet. And this allows for roughly 36 feet of HO mainline around the room, which in real life is about a half mile of track. So if you think about that, with my current layout, which has 14 turnouts and uses 31 feet of mainline track in that space, that is not realistic for that space. One could argue N scale would be better, and I agree that N scale would be better for that space, but I just love HO. So I have to think about that for the next layout, in that I've got this, realistically about a half mile of space to model. So this is going to really hinder my choices, and I have to factor that in. So just as a side note, more realistic for older eras in rolling stock, right? Shorter rolling stock, 40 feet. I have some rolling stock that's about 34 feet, and I actually used some of the rolling stock from Rocky Valley on this current layout, and it performed way better. So it just goes to show that it's definitely more suited for the older eras. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example that I found by Lance Mindheim on his blog. So this compares modern versus older railroading. And on the top diagram, the top picture here, we have a 1950s arrangement of spurs, and then the two below are the modern approach. So the 1950s arrangement, this is very similar to what I'm currently modeling. We've got one spur dedicated to a single customer, whereas the modern approach, the less track, the better. It costs less, right? But it's more efficient. The less spurs you have to work, the better. So the modern logistics warehouse, we can see that we have 5 different customers on this one spur. And a team track, this works in the same principle, multiple customers on one spur. So in short, this means that modern railroading isn't so much about the number of spurs, right? But it's more of a focus on the number of car spots. And this is something else that I need to consider, given that I want to model the modern railroads of today. So here's a really crude drawing of my current layout plan, and I apologize about that. But if we use this image in conjunction with the example from Lance Mindheim, it's quite clear that this looks more like a 1950s, railroad. I mean, like as I said, there's 14 turnouts in this small space, this 9 foot by 9 foot space, and that's just not realistic. With these tight curves and excessive industry spurs, it's really only suited for older rolling stock and nothing else. So overall, I'm not modeling what I truly desire. So again, another question, how do I model what I truly want? Well, I have to come up with a series of steps to follow. So step 1 is developing a plan for what I want to model. Step 2 is the designing the layout, and step 3 is building the design. Now it's important here to note that there's a distinction between a plan and a design, and Lance Mindheim also talks about this. So I'm not going to read this quote, but it's very important to know the difference. In summary, essentially the plan is the overall fundamentals of the layout, like how much space you have, how much money, how much time you have that you can devote to building your layout and operating your layout. Whereas the design is the technical aspects. So this is track radius, this is the number, or the numbered turnouts, but the type of turnouts, that sort of thing. The track gauge. I mean, all those sorts of things, all the technical aspects. And I never really thought about the difference between the two. I always use these terms interchangeably. But once I read this, I realized that, my approach to building a model railroad is just not right. I mean, you really have to know what you want before you can even come up with a design. Otherwise, you could design 100 layouts and you're just not going to be happy. So that's definitely something I need to consider for the future design as well. So again, there's some questions that Lance Mindheim asks his reader to reflect on in his book, or his blog, I can't remember which one. I'm not going to read these out. You can certainly pause the screen if you want, or pause the video rather if you want, and read these through. But these are questions that he asks the hobbyist to reflect on. So it's all the things that I meant. It's the time, it's the money, it's the energy, all those sorts of things. Nothing about the technical aspects. So what I'm going to do is focus on step 1 and develop a layout plan. So I'm going to use the questions from the prior slide that were provided by Lance Mindheim, and I'm going to come up with these answers and reflect on them for a bit to understand exactly what it is that I want and what I'm capable of doing from a layout space and skill level perspective. The skill level will definitely, or should definitely, play into the overall plan. And that's not something I think the average modeler thinks about either. We kind of jump ahead and we think, we'll kind of learn as we go, but that might not be the best approach either. So that's just something to consider. So in my next presentation, I'm going to share my answers that I've come up with to these questions, and probably some questions and answers that I've come up with afterwards as well, some more self-reflection. What I want to do is I want to go ahead and create a series of presentations, maybe 3 or 4 different ones, to kind of show the process as it unfolds. I'm hoping that this is going to inspire others to sort of follow along. If there's anybody out there that's sort of struggling with their layout design or they're not happy with their model railroad, I think this approach is a really good one to follow. So I'm hoping that this series of presentations will allow other hobbyists out there to have something to use to help guide them forwards. That's all I have for you in this presentation. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to watch. Please comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you.